Jake Murphy stood at the observation deck window, staring at the massive space station that would be his home for the next 2 years. Nexus Prime stretched out before him like a small metal city floating in the darkness of space. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports, their designs as alien as their crews. He pressed his hand against the cool metal wall and took a deep breath. This was it. The Galactic Defense Academy. Only 12 humans had been accepted this year out of thousands who applied. Jake still couldn't believe he was one of them. The transport ship shuddered as it connected to the docking bay around him. Other new cadets gathered their belongings. Jake recognized a few species from the orientation materials he had studied. The tall ones with gray skin and bone plates covering their arms were Krillians. They looked like they were born for war. The smaller ones with 4 arms and quick movements were Xanthari. And the pale ones with large eyes who never seemed to speak out loud were Vorth. Jake picked up his single bag and followed the crowd toward the exit. As a human, he felt small and weak compared to most of the other cadets. The Krillians towered over everyone else, their natural armor making soft clicking sounds as they walked. The Xanthari moved with a fluid grace that made Jake feel clumsy just watching them. The docking bay was huge and filled with noise. Different species called out to each other in languages Jake didn't understand. Some made clicking sounds, others used musical tones, and a few communicated with hand gestures. Jake looked around for other humans and spotted a small group near the far wall. He walked over to them, grateful to see familiar faces. There were 8 humans in total, including himself. Most looked as nervous as he felt. One woman stood apart from the group, reading something on a small device. She had brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wore the same gray cadet uniform as everyone else. She looked up as Jake approached. "You must be Jake Murphy," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Lisa Carter. I read your file during this trip here." Jake shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip. "Nice to meet you. Where are you from?" "Colorado." "You? Texas? What did you do before this?" Lisa's expression didn't change. "Military service? You, engineering school?" Jake waited for her to say more, but she went back to reading her device. She seemed friendly enough, but there was something about her that made him curious. She was quiet in a way that felt different from shyness. A loud voice boomed across. "The docking bay. New cadets. Form up by species groups. Now." The voice belonged to a massive Krillian who stood at least 8 feet tall. His bone armor was more developed than the younger cadets, covering most of his chest and arms. Scars marked the exposed gray skin of his face and hands. This had to be one of the instructors. The human group moved together, staying close as they followed the crowd toward the main academy entrance. Jake noticed how the other species seemed to naturally organize themselves. The Krillians moved in tight military formations. The Xanthari flowed like water around obstacles. The Vorth walked in perfect silence. Humans just looked confused. The Academy's main hall was enormous. Banners from dozens of worlds hung from the high ceiling. Jake recognized a few from his studies, but most were completely alien to him. The floor was made of some kind of smooth black stone that reflected the overhead lights. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," the large Krillian instructor said, his voice carrying easily through the huge space. "I am Commander Thexkar. For the next 2 years, this station will be your home, your school, and your testing ground." He began walking back and forth in front of the assembled cadets. "Each of you comes from a species with unique strengths. The Krillians bring natural armor and strength." The Krillian cadets stood straighter. The Xanthari offer speed and agility. The 4-armed aliens seemed to move even when standing still. The Vorth provide mental coordination and tactical thinking. The pale cadets remained perfectly motionless. Commander Vexkar's eyes moved to the human group, and the humans bring diplomatic skills and technical knowledge. Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment. The way the commander said it made humans sound like clerks, not warriors. He glanced at his fellow humans and saw the same uncomfortable expressions on their faces. all except Lisa, who watched the commander with calm attention. You will be divided into training groups, that Scar continued. Combat training, tactical studies, weapon systems, and command structure. Each species will contribute according to their natural abilities. The next hour was spent assigning cadets to dormitories and training schedules. Jake found himself sharing a room with two other humans, while Lisa was placed in a single room down the hall. The Krillians and Zenthari got the larger quarters, which made sense given their size. That evening, Jake sat in the dining hall with the other human cadets. The food was bland, but edible, designed to be safe for all species. Around them, the alien cadets ate and talked among themselves. The Krillians were loud and boisterous, sharing what sounded like war stories. The Zenthari ate quickly and efficiently with all four hands. The Vorth ate in complete silence. "Did you see how he looked at us?" asked Pete Williams, a human from California. "Like we don't belong here?" "Maybe we don't," said another human, Sarah Johnson from New York. "Look around. Everyone else here is built for fighting. We're just ... normal. ... Jake looked across the room at a group of Krillian cadets. One of them, larger than the others, was demonstrating some kind of combat move. His bone armor gleamed under the lights as he moved. The other Krillians watched with respect and admiration. "We're here for a reason," Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "They wouldn't have accepted us if we couldn't contribute something." "Technical support," Pete said bitterly. "We're going to be the ones fixing their equipment while they do the real fighting." Lisa hadn't said anything during the conversation. She ate her food quietly and watched the other species with the same calm attention she had shown during the commander's speech. Finally, she stood up with her empty tray. "Where are you going?" Sarah asked. "Training room," Lisa said. "Want to look around before classes start tomorrow." After she left, Pete shook his head. "That one's weird. Barely says anything." Jake watched Lisa walk away. There was something about the way she moved that reminded him of his older brother, who had been in the military. Confident but careful. Like someone who was always aware of everything around them. The next morning would bring their first combat training session. Jake went to bed that night wondering if he had made a mistake coming here. The other species seemed so much more prepared for military life. But he was here now, and he was going to represent humanity the best way he could. I had no idea that everything would change in just a few days. When the quiet woman from Colorado would show everyone what humans were really capable of. The alarm rang through the dormitory at 5 in the morning. Jake rolled out of bed, his muscles already sore from yesterday's orientation exercises. Around him, his human roommates groaned and stumbled toward the shower facilities. Hall, he could hear the Krillians moving around, their bone armor clicking against the metal walls. Combat training was scheduled for 7 o'clock. Jake pulled on his training uniform and tried to eat breakfast, but his stomach was too nervous to handle much food. The other human cadets looked just as worried as he felt. The training hall was enormous, with high ceilings and padded floors. Different sections were marked off for various types of combat practice. Weapons racks lined the walls, filled with training gear designed for multiple species. Some of the weapons Jake recognized, but others looked completely alien. Commander Thexker stood in the center of the room with two other instructors. One was a Zenthari female, with intricate markings on her forearms. The other was a Vorth, whose pale skin seemed to glow under the bright lights. "Today you begin real training," Dexkar announced as the cadets gathered around him. "Combat is the foundation of military service. Every officer must know how to fight, regardless of their specialty." He gestured to the Zenthari instructor. "Instructor Villana will demonstrate proper sparring technique with a volunteer." Zenthari cadet stepped forward immediately. She was smaller than the instructor, but moved with the same fluid grace. Her forearms weaved complex patterns in the air as she prepared for combat. The demonstration was over in seconds. Instructor Villana moved so fast that Jake could barely follow her motions. The cadet found herself on the ground, all forearms pinned before she even realized what had happened. "Speed and precision," Villana said in accented English. "Use all advantages your species provides." Next came the Krillian demonstration. Two massive cadets faced each other, their bone armor gleaming. They crashed together like boulders, each trying to overpower the other through pure strength. The winner managed to get his opponent in a hold that would have crushed the bones of any unarmored species. Power and endurance, Dexkar said with obvious pride. The Krillian way. The fourth demonstration was different. Two of the pale aliens stood motionless for several seconds, their large eyes closed in concentration. Suddenly, one moved with perfect timing to counter an attack that hadn't even started yet. The brief fight looked like a carefully choreographed dance. Mental coordination, the fourth instructor said, in a whisper that somehow carried across the entire room. Know your opponent's thoughts before they do. Then it was time for individual sparring matches. Jake watched as cadets from different species paired off. The matches were not even close to fair. Krillians overpowered everyone through brute strength. Xanthari used their extra arms and speed to overwhelm opponents. Vorth seemed to predict every move before it happened. Murphy, Jake, Dexkar called out, "You will spar with Cadet Vexali." Jake's heart sank. Vexali was one of the Xanthari cadets he had noticed yesterday. She was about his height, but built like a dancer, all lean muscle and quick reflexes. Her forearms moved constantly, never staying in one position for more than a second. They faced each other in the center of a practice circle. Other cadets gathered around to watch. Jake could hear some of the aliens making what sounded like bets about how quickly the match would end. Begin, Valana said. Jake tried to remember his basic self-defense training from college. He raised his hands in a defensive position and moved forward carefully. Vexali watched him with bright yellow eyes, her forearms weaving hypnotic patterns. She struck without warning. Two hands grabbed Jake's wrists, while a third hit him in the stomach. The fourth hand swept his legs out from under him. Jake hit the padded floor hard, all the air knocked out of his lungs. Match over, Valana announced. Time. For seconds. Jake struggled to his feet, his face burning with embarrassment. Around the circle, alien cadets made sounds that might have been laughter. Even some of the human cadets looked uncomfortable, as if Jake had somehow let them all down. More matches followed. Every human cadet lost quickly and completely. Williams lasted 6 seconds against a Krillian who wasn't even trying hard. Sarah Johnson managed 8 seconds against a Vorth who seemed to be moving in slow motion. Lisa's turn came near the end of the session. She had been watching from the side, taking notes on a small pad. When her name was called, she walked into the circle with the same calm expression she always wore. Her opponent was a young Krillian male named Drexen. He wasn't as large as some of the others, but his bone armor was well developed, and his confidence was obvious. He looked down at Lisa with something that might have been pity. "I will try not to hurt you," he said in careful English. Lisa nodded politely. "Thank you." The match began. Drexen moved forward slowly, clearly planning to end things quickly, but gently. Lisa moved away from his reaching hands, staying just out of range. She seemed to be studying his movements. Watching how his armor shifted when he turned, Drexen grew impatient and lunged forward with both hands. Lisa stepped aside smoothly and struck at his elbow joint, where the armor plates didn't quite meet. The Krillian stumbled but didn't fall. "Interesting," Nexkar muttered. The match continued for almost a minute. Lisa kept moving, never staying in one place long enough for Drexen to grab her. She struck at joints and pressure points, looking for weaknesses in his natural armor. The young Krillian became more and more frustrated as his attacks failed. To connect finally, Drexen made a desperate charge. Lisa ducked under his arms and swept his legs. The Krillian hit the ground hard, his armor clattering against the floor. The training hall went completely silent. "Match over," Valana said, sounding surprised. "Winner, Cadet Carter." Lisa helped Drexen to his feet. The young Krillian looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Around the circle, alien cadets stared at the human woman who had just defeated one of their own. "Adequate," Dexkar said, but Jake could hear something different. In his voice, "All cadets will practice basic forms for the remainder of the session." During the practice session, Jake noticed that the alien cadets kept glancing at Lisa. She worked through the basic forms with smooth, efficient movements that looked simple but somehow felt dangerous. When she thought no one was watching, Jake saw her practicing more complex techniques that definitely weren't part of the academy curriculum. After training, the human cadets gathered in their common room. Everyone wanted to know how Lisa had managed to beat a Krillian in combat. "Just basic self-defense," she said, not looking up from the book she was reading. "Every species has weak points if you know where to look." "But how did you know?" Sarah asked. "I've never seen fighting like that." Lisa closed her book and looked at the group. For a moment, Jake thought she might actually explain. Then her expression went back to its usual calm neutrality. "Experience," she said simply. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lisa's fight and the way she had moved. There was something about her that didn't match the quiet, unremarkable woman she appeared to be. He had a feeling that the academy instructors were about to learn something important about humans. He was right, but he had no idea just how dramatic that lesson would be. 2 weeks passed at the academy. Jake had gotten used to the daily routine of classes, training, and studying. The human cadets were slowly finding their places in the academy structure, though not always where they wanted to be. During tactical exercises, the humans were always assigned to support roles. Jake found himself running communications equipment while Krillians and Zenthari planned actual battle strategies. Pete Williams was put in charge of supply logistics. Sarah Johnson worked on medical support systems. It was clear that the instructors saw humans as useful, but not as real warriors. They were the ones who would stay behind and keep the equipment running. While the other species did the fighting, Jake tried not to let it bother him, but it was hard. Every day he watched alien cadets practice advanced combat techniques while humans learned about computer systems and supply chains. Even the youngest Krillian cadet was considered more valuable in a fight than any human. Lisa seemed unbothered by the situation. She attended her assigned classes and completed her support duties without complaint. But Jake noticed that she still spent time alone in the training halls after hours. Sometimes he would see her there when he passed by on his way back from the library. The breaking point came during a major tactical assessment. All the cadets were divided into teams to plan a mock battle scenario. The exercise was designed to test leadership skills and strategic thinking. Jake was assigned to Team 7 as communications specialist. The team leader was Krexith, a Krillian cadet who stood nearly 8 feet tall and had the most developed bone armor Jake had ever seen. His natural plating covered almost his entire torso and arms, making him look like a walking tank. Krexith was also one of the most arrogant beings Jake had ever met. The scenario involved defending a space station against enemy attack. Each team had to present their battle plan to a panel of instructors, including Commander Vexkar. Jake spent hours working on communication protocols and coordination systems for their defense. When Team 7's turn came, Krexith stood before the instructors with obvious confidence. His plan was simple and direct: meet the enemy head-on with overwhelming force. The Krillian and Zenthari team members would form the main battle line while other species provided support. "What role do the humans play in your strategy?" asked Bolana. Krexith's bone plates shifted as he shrugged. "They will monitor communications and tend to the wounded. It is what they do best." Jake felt his jaw clench, but he stayed quiet. This was Krexith's presentation. "You do not consider humans capable of combat roles?" Commander Vexkar asked. "With respect, Commander, humans are physically weak," Krexith said. His voice carried easily through the room, and Jake noticed that other cadets were listening. "They have no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no special abilities. They are valuable for support functions, but placing them in combat would be wasteful." Several alien cadets made sounds of agreement. Jake looked around and saw other humans in the room shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "In my opinion," Krexith continued, getting bolder, "humans should focus on what they do well: technical support, medical aid, supply management. Leave it the fighting two species that evolved for it." The room was completely quiet now. Jake could feel heat rising in his face. Around him, the other human cadets looked embarrassed and angry. "Perhaps," Krexith said with what might have been meant as kindness, "humans would be better suited to civilian roles. Clerks and technicians rather than warriors. That was too much." Jake started to stand up, ready to defend his species even, if it got him in trouble. But before he could speak, a calm voice cut through the silence. "I disagree." Everyone turned to look at Lisa Carter. She had been sitting quietly in the back of the room, but now she stood up with the same composed expression. She always wore Crexith's bone plates rattled as he laughed. "You disagree, little human? Have you seen yourself fight? Your species barely lasted seconds in our combat exercises." "I lasted longer than that," Lisa said quietly. "You beat one small Krillian through luck," Crexith said dismissively. "Was not even trying hard. Any real warrior would crush you without effort." Jake could see other cadets nodding along with Crexith's words. Even some of the human cadets looked like they thought Lisa was making a mistake by speaking up. "You think so?" Lisa asked. "I know so," Crexith said. His confidence was absolute. "Humans are soft. You evolved on an easy world where everything was handed to you. You never had to fight for survival like real warrior species." Commander Thexkar was watching the exchange with interest. The other instructors looked curious about where this was going. "That you'd be willing to prove that?" Lisa asked. Crexith's laughter boomed through the room. "Are you challenging me to combat, little human?" "Yes," Lisa said simply. The room erupted in excited chatter. Alien cadets spoke rapidly in their own languages, while humans stared at Lisa in shock. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. Crexith was one of the largest and strongest cadets in the entire academy. He had never lost a sparring match to anyone. "This is foolish," Sarah Johnson whispered to Jake. "She's going to get hurt." Commander Thexkar raised his hand for silence. "Cadet Carter, are you certain about this challenge?" "Yes, sir," Lisa said. "And you, Cadet Crexith, do you accept?" Crexith's bone plate shifted as he tried to control his amusement. "I accept, though I worry about injuring such a small opponent." "A match will be held tomorrow morning," Thexkar announced. "Standard sparring rules. Combat continues until submission or incapacitation. All instructors will be present to ensure safety." As the cadets filed out of the room, Jake caught up with Lisa in the hallway. "Are you crazy?" he asked. "Could kill you by accident. He's twice your size and covered in natural armor." Lisa looked at him with those calm eyes. "Size isn't everything, Jake. But he's right about one thing," Jake said desperately. "Humans aren't built for this kind of fighting. We're just not as strong as the other species." "Strength isn't everything either," Lisa said. "Then what is—" For the first time since Jake had met her, Lisa smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that made Jake think of his brother coming home from deployment, changed by things he couldn't talk about. "Experience," she said. That night, Jake lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Round him, his roommates whispered about the upcoming match. Some thought Lisa was brave. Others thought she was suicidal. Jake thought about what Crexith had said about humans being weak and soft. Maybe it was true. Maybe humans really didn't belong in a place like this, surrounded by species that had evolved for warfare. But there was something about Lisa that made him think differently. The way she moved, the way she watched everything with those careful eyes, the way she never seemed surprised by anything. Jake had a feeling that tomorrow's match would teach everyone something important about humans. He just hoped Lisa would survive long enough to teach it. Down the hall, Lisa Carter sat alone in her room, cleaning and checking equipment that wasn't part of the standard academy issue. Her movements were precise and automatic, the actions of someone who had done this many times before. Tomorrow, the Galactic Defense Academy would learn why humans were called the species from the Death World, Earth. The training hall was packed. Word about the challenge had spread through the entire academy overnight. Astets from every species crowded around the main sparring circle, eager to watch the human get crushed by the mighty Krillian warrior. Jake arrived early with the other human cadets. They found seats together in the front section, though Jake wasn't sure he wanted to watch what was about to happen. Pete Williams looked sick to his stomach. Sarah Johnson kept shaking her head and muttering about how this was a terrible idea. The alien cadets were much more excited. Groups of Krillians made loud boasts about how quickly their champion would win. Xanthari cadets moved restlessly in their seats, their forearms gesturing as they discussed fighting techniques. Even the usually quiet Vorth seemed interested. their large eyes focused intently on the sparring circle. Commander Thexkar entered with the other instructors. Behind them walked Krexith, looking confident and relaxed. His bone armor gleamed. Under the bright lights, covering his massive chest and arms like natural battle gear, he waved to the cheering Krillian cadets and flexed his muscles for show. Lisa entered from the opposite side of the hall. She wore the same gray training uniform as everyone else, looking small and ordinary next to the towering alien instructors. She didn't wave or acknowledge the crowd. She just walked calmly to her side of the sparring circle and began stretching. Jake noticed that her stretching routine was different from what they had learned in basic training. Lisa moved through poses and exercises that looked more like a dance than preparation for combat. Her movements were smooth and controlled with no wasted motion. "This won't take long," said a Krillian cadet sitting behind Jake. "Poor little human doesn't know what she's getting into." "Alright, she got lucky against Drexen," said another. "Krexith won't make the same mistake." Commander Thexkar raised his hand for silence. "This is an official sparring match between Cadet Krexith of Krillia and Cadet Lisa Carter of Earth. Standard Academy rules apply. Combat continues until submission or incapacitation. Medical teams are standing by." Jake looked at the medical teams positioned around the hall. They had equipment designed for multiple species, but most of it looked like it was meant for treating the winner's minor injuries, not putting the loser back together. "Fighters, take your positions," Thexkar announced. Krexith stepped into the center of the circle. Standing at his full height, he looked like a mountain of gray flesh and bone armor. His hands were the size of dinner plates, and his natural plating could probably stop a knife blade. Lisa walked to the opposite side of the circle. Next to Krexith, she looked like a child facing an adult. The size difference was so extreme that several alien cadets made sounds of disbelief that this was actually happening. "Human, it is not too late to surrender," Krexith said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I do not wish to seriously harm you." Lisa looked up at him with those calm eyes. "I appreciate your concern," she said quietly. "Very well," Krexith said, shaking his massive head. "We'll make this as quick as possible." The two fighters faced each other across the circle. Jake's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Around him, the crowd had gone completely silent. "Begin," Commander Thexkar said. Krexith moved forward slowly and carefully. Despite his arrogance, he was a trained fighter who understood the importance of not underestimating any opponent. His plan was clearly to grab Lisa quickly and end the match with a simple submission hold. Lisa stayed in the center of the circle, watching Krexith approach. She bounced lightly on her feet, hands loose at her sides. To Jake, she looked relaxed, almost casual. Krexith reached out with his massive hands, intending to grab Lisa's shoulders and lift her off the ground. It should have been simple. He was bigger, stronger, and had much longer reach. Lisa moved. Jake had never seen anything like it. 1 second, she was standing directly in front of Krexith. The next, she was beside him, having slipped under his grabbing hands like water flowing around a rock. Her movement was so smooth and effortless that it looked like she had teleported Krexith. Stumbled forward, confused by Lisa's sudden disappearance from in front of him, he spun around, looking for his tiny opponent. Lisa was right there, close enough to touch his armored back. But instead of attacking, she stepped away and resumed her relaxed fighting stance. "What?" Krexith said, his bone plates rattling with confusion. He tried again, this time moving faster and using both hands to grab at Lisa from different angles. She avoided both attempts with minimal movement, stepping and turning just enough to let his hands pass harmlessly by. The crowd was completely silent now. What they were watching didn't make sense. Krexith was one of the Academy's best fighters, but he couldn't even touch the small human. Krexith's confidence began to crack. He made a serious attempt to grab Lisa, putting his full speed and strength into the attack. Lisa ducked under his arms and moved behind him again, this time tapping him lightly on the back of his knee. The tap was barely noticeable, but it sent a clear message. She could have attacked him seriously if she had wanted. 2. "Stand still and fight," Krexith roared, his frustration boiling over. That was his mistake. Anger made him careless. Krexeth charged forward with both arms spread wide. Trying to corner Lisa against the edge of the sparring circle, he was no longer thinking about technique or strategy, just wanted to get his hands on the human who was making him look foolish. Lisa waited until the last possible second, then moved. What happened next would be talked about in the academy for years to come. Lisa didn't just dodge Krexeth's charge. She used his own momentum against him, grabbing his extended arm and redirecting his forward motion into a spinning throw that sent the massive Krillian crashing to the ground. The impact shook the entire training hall. Krexeth's bone armor cracked against the padded floor with a sound like breaking stone. Before he could recover, Lisa was on him. Her movements were no longer smooth and flowing. They were sharp, precise, and brutally efficient. She grabbed Krexeth's arm and twisted it into a position that no joint was meant to handle. The sickening crack of breaking bone echoed through the silence. Krex's scream was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was the sound of a creature that had never experienced real pain suddenly discovering what agony felt like. The massive Krillian, who had seemed invincible just moments before, writhed on the ground, clutching his shattered arm. Lisa released the hold immediately and stepped back, her face showing no emotion at all. "Match over," Commander Thexkar announced, his voice filled with shock. "Winner, Cadet Carter." The Krillian was still screaming, his natural armor providing no protection. Against the kind of pain that came from broken bones and torn ligaments, Jake stared at Lisa in complete amazement. She stood calmly beside the circle, breathing normally, without a scratch on her. She had just defeated one of the Academy's strongest cadets, as easily as an adult might handle a child. Around the hall, alien cadets sat in stunned silence. The Krillians looked like they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The Zenthari were making rapid gestures with all four arms, their equivalent of excited chatter. Even the Vorth seemed shaken, their usual composure cracked by what they had seen. Commander Thexkar walked over to Lisa. "Cadet Carter, that was... impressive. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Lisa looked up at him with the same calm expression she always wore. "Earth," she said simply. Jake finally understood. Lisa Carter wasn't just a quiet woman from Colorado. She was something much more dangerous. She was a human who had learned to fight other humans. On a world where survival meant being better than everyone else, who wanted to kill you, the aliens were about to learn that humans didn't evolve in a peaceful paradise. They came from a death world where every species, including their own, was an enemy to be overcome. The medical team worked quickly to treat Krexeth's shattered arm. The massive Krillian had stopped screaming, but his gray skin had turned pale and his bone armor was cracked in several places. The injury was severe enough that he would need surgery and months of recovery time. Jake watched the medics carry Krexeth out on a stretcher. The proud warrior who had mocked humans just minutes ago now looked small and broken. Around the training hall, alien cadets whispered among themselves in shocked voices. Commander Thexkar stood in the center of the sparring circle, staring at Lisa with new eyes. The other instructors gathered around him, speaking in low, urgent tones. Jake could see that everything had changed. The casual dismissal of human capabilities was over. "Cadet Carter," Thexkar said finally, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "Please explain what just happened here." Lisa walked to the center of the circle. She looked completely calm, as if breaking the arm of the Academy's strongest cadet was just another training exercise. "I used a joint lock technique to disable my opponent," she said simply. "That was not a technique taught at this academy," Instructor Villana said, her forearms moving nervously. "Where did you learn it?" "On Earth," Lisa replied. "Combat training?" Thexkar asked. Lisa was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to explain. Finally, she nodded toward the alien cadets who were still staring at her. "You think humans are weak because we don't have natural armor or enhanced strength," she said. "You're right. We don't. But you made a mistake about what that means." She began walking around the edge of the sparring circle as she talked. Every eye in the hall followed her movement. Every species here evolved with natural advantages, Lisa continued. Krillians have bone armor and strength. Xanthari have speed and forearms. Vorth have mental abilities. You all developed these gifts because your homeworlds were dangerous. Could see alien cadets nodding along. This made sense to them. Earth was dangerous too, Lisa said. But our planet didn't give us armor or extra limbs or special powers. It gave us something else.
What? Asked a young Xanthari cadet. Lisa stopped walking and faced the crowd. Other humans? The training hall was completely silent, Jake felt.
A chill run down his spine. For thousands of years, the most dangerous thing on Earth wasn't wild animals or natural disasters, Lisa explained. It was other humans. We fought each other constantly. Wars, battles, individual combat. Generation. After generation, the humans who survived were the ones who could defeat other humans. Commander Thexkar was listening intently. You developed combat techniques specifically for fighting your own species. We had to, Lisa said. A human with a weapon is one of the most dangerous things on our planet. So we learned how to fight. Armed opponents while unarmed. We learned how to use an enemy's strength against them. We learned how to find weak points in any defense. She gestured toward the spot where Krexith had fallen. Krillian bone armor is impressive, but it's designed to stop cutting and crushing attacks. It doesn't protect against joint manipulation or pressure point strikes. Xanthari speed is useful, but predictable if you understand their movement patterns. Fourth mental coordination works against enemies who think the same way they do. They began to understand what she was saying. While other species had evolved to fight the creatures of their own worlds, humans had evolved to fight each other. And humans were much more creative and dangerous than any natural predator. But you're still smaller and weaker, said a Krillian cadet, whose voice shook slightly. Size and strength matter in some fights, Lisa agreed. But skill and technique matter more. A human martial artist can defeat opponents much larger than themselves by using leverage, timing, and knowledge of anatomy. She looked around the hall at all the alien faces staring at her. Every human learns some form of combat training. Call it self-defense, but really it's preparation for fighting other humans. Some of us, like me, learned more advanced techniques. Is your background Cadet Carter? Thexkar asked. I served 8 years with the Earth Marine Corps, Lisa said. Force reconnaissance. I specialized in close-quarters combat and hand-to-hand fighting. Before that, I competed in mixed martial arts tournaments. Force Recon Marines were some of the most elite soldiers on Earth. They were trained to fight in the worst possible conditions against the most dangerous enemies. And mixed martial arts was human combat sport, where trained fighters tried to defeat each other using any technique that worked. You were a professional warrior, Thexkar said. Understanding beginning to show in his voice. Most humans have some combat training, Lisa corrected. I just have more than most. She walked back to the center of the circle. You made the mistake of thinking that because humans look weak, we are weak. But appearances can be deceiving. We're not the strongest or fastest species, but we might be the most dangerous in a fight. Commander Thexkar was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke again, his tone was completely different. Cadet Carter, would you be willing to demonstrate some of these human combat techniques to the other cadets? Sir, Lisa said. And would you be available to assist with advanced combat instruction? If needed, sir. Thexkar looked around the hall at all the alien cadets who were still staring at Lisa with new respect and wariness. It appears we have underestimated human capabilities, he announced. This will be corrected immediately. From now on, human cadets will participate fully in all combat training. We will also be incorporating human fighting techniques into our curriculum. Jake felt a surge of pride and excitement. Finally, humans would be treated as equals in the academy. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Lisa became an assistant, combat instructor, teaching alien cadets how humans had learned to fight. The techniques that seemed simple to her were revolutionary to species who had relied on natural advantages. Jake found himself, moved from communications support to tactical planning. Pete Williams was assigned to a combat unit instead of supply logistics. Sarah Johnson became a field medic who could fight alongside the soldiers she treated, the alien cadets treated. Humans differently now. There was respect in their eyes, but also caution. They had learned that the quiet, unremarkable humans might be far more dangerous than they appeared. Jake often watched Lisa teaching combat classes to groups of fascinated alien students. She would demonstrate how to disable a Krillion's armor, how to counter a Zen-3's speed advantage, how to disrupt a Vorth's mental coordination. The students learned quickly that human combat techniques were based on one simple principle: every enemy, no matter how strong or well protected, had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who knew what to look for. Months later, when Jake graduated from the academy as a tactical officer rather than a communications specialist, he thought about that first day when Commander Thexkar had dismissed humans as useful only for diplomatic skills and technical knowledge. Now the commander regularly consulted with human instructors on combat strategy. Other species came to study at the academy specifically to learn human fighting techniques. The galaxy had discovered that the soft-looking species from the small blue planet might be the most effective warriors they had ever encountered. Jake smiled as he watched Lisa teaching a class of young Krillians how to fight without relying on their natural armor. They listened to every word with the respect normally reserved for the greatest warriors. Humanity had found its place among the stars. And it turned out that place was exactly where they had always been on Earth, at the top of the food chain.